Hey, everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Today I have on Di Gates, who is the founder of Connection Heroes, serial entrepreneur, leader of many organizations, creative organizations, independent organizations over the years. She has come on to talk a little bit about I think what we've all been feeling this year, which is detachment, the great detachment. So we worked our way through the great resignation, but now that hiring has slowed, there is a new study coming out from Gallup that came out from Gallup that shows that retention has crept up, but engagement has decreased. And so we're really thinking about what is happening in the workplace today. And uh, Di has been thinking about this for a while, and she started this company, Connection Heroes, in order to solve for this problem, how to get folks, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it, how to get folks that are not working in the same place at the same time to actually feel more connected. So hybrid workplaces. Di, thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio. It's really good to have you.
Absolute pleasure, Josh. Looking forward to getting our teeth into debate. So meaty one.
Fantastic. So, let's start a little bit with kind of why we're here, and then we can back up to kind of your history a bit. You wanted to start again. You were actually running a creative agency, a brand. You're doing some brand work, and you actually left that in order to kind of because you felt so passionate about this idea of connection. Can you tell me about how you kind of realized the importance of what was happening and maybe what was sort of missing that kind of sparked this idea for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it goes back probably my last two businesses, Josh. So
Great.
my first business, your typical creative agency, city centre, north of England, you can tell by the accent. Um, 25 staff, young guys. I was young at the time, my 20s, buzzy, in person, all of the connection that you can ever wish for. I sold out of that for reasons not for today's podcast. I
Next time.
next time. I was about 30, I sold out of that and I was petrified. I thought, what am I going to do without that connection, that buzz? I probably wasn't using this language, right? But that's what
Mhm.
I we were a team, we were a great team, and the idea of not being part of that team was terrifying. But I wanted to work on not just creative projects. I wanted to help organizations on bigger culture projects, change projects, meaty, gnarly stuff that needed a what I thought I was a comms expert. And so I launched out of that 15 years ago with a fully remote agency, no payroll staff, freelancers, associates, working collaboratively with clients, all online. Sometimes I didn't meet these clients. Sometimes the associates I pulled in, I didn't meet. But I wanted that fun. I wanted that connection. I wanted those results. So I kind of created this different way of working 15 years ago. Loved it, done it for 15 years. Pandemic. And all of a sudden, that boat I was in 15 years ago of working with people I didn't see was the same boat everyone else was now in. And it's hard. And everyone started missing all of those things that I was fearful of all of those years ago. And I thought, I've been through this journey. I've battled this. I've figured out how to combine technology with human connection, with technology, with agile project management, with human-centered design. I felt like there was something I could do to help these leaders and these managers and these teams that now had distributed, remote, hybrid teams. So it wasn't about the comms angle, it was about how I'd been working for 15 years. And I just felt there was something I could do that could help.
That's amazing. It's almost like you were sort of you kind of foreshadowing. You happened to end up in the scenario that we all were forced
Mm,
into. And
yeah,
so you in this moment you were like, "Oh, wow. Like
yeah.
this is a big problem that people are facing." And did you like, you're like, I know exactly what we need to do. Did you need to do more research? Did you need to figure out like, because it feels like I know in that moment too, where you're like, oh my gosh, look at this issue. I've been thinking about this for a long time and I can really help. I can contribute to that. So what's your journey? What was the movement from well, maybe B to C of like how like you were like, "Oh my gosh." And so what did you have to learn? What did you already know?
Oh God, learn loads, unlearn loads as well. So my starting point was, is this actually a problem? Are people feeling this disconnection? Are people feeling this? So around about the first kind of we all came to work, we stopped going to work, we came back to work. The things changed a lot over that pandemic period, certainly in the UK, in terms of mandates to work from home, mandates to go back in. So I just started conversation. I reached out to culture leaders, people leaders. Back then, that there wasn't the same diversity. Kind of HR was more functional, wasn't it? It's
Yep.
changed
Yep.
so crazy much. And I reached out to a community of people who were scared, who were very uncertain, who, HR people up until that point, they'd been a function in the business that wasn't really called upon to be innovative. They were
Yeah.
the rule enforcers. Yeah, they
Yep.
were.
I think everybody that yes,
Yeah,
I think we all know we all know
there's
that. Yeah.
I'd spent 15 years running a remote collaboration innovation business. So I was like, I get this, and innovation can be taught, collaboration can be taught. We can learn these things. So I spoke with people who were scared to admit they didn't know, who were scared or didn't
Mhm.
not scared to experiment, didn't really know how to experiment because the people function wasn't really an experimental space back
That's
then.
right. That's right.
So I learned, and I was like, well, you guys need a framework. This is what you need. You need a framework to say, how can we understand if we have a connection issue, if our people are disconnecting? So I designed a framework to help them run surveys to understand what was happening and where the cracks were, what areas of the business were starting to disconnect, where were people no longer feeling that connection? Was it with colleagues? Was it with managers? Was it
Yeah.
about the type of work? So that's where it started. It started with conversations and a tool to help these people find out. That's where it started. That's kind of 2 years ago.
So what was the conclusion? What did you find out? What did you
So
learn?
I realized that two things. Businesses had so much to do at that stage. They were reacting tactically, operationally. Let's put in
Yeah.
Zoom, let's put in,
Yeah.
Google Drive. So we were responding to a human crisis with technology tools. And then as we started to emerge from the pandemic, what was obvious is, but we're still hurting as humans, right? This is still really hard. You can plug
What do you
Zoom.
mean? We've got Zoom. We're on Zoom all the time. I see you all the time. It should solve the problem.
But that's the problem. There was this short-term maintenance of productivity. So we all thought,
Yeah.
we've won,
Yay, we've won.
won,
Right, exactly. We've won.
um, we've
I can
won.
do just as much email from home.
Yay. And then we realized, shit, look at all of these stats around isolation. Look at all of these stats of what's this quiet quitting thing? We suddenly started realizing that both the people's health and well-being and the business metrics, they weren't fixed. Actually, they were going down. And so
Right.
realization, which is what led directly to connection here, is the big thing here is in the olden days, connection, it didn't happen perfectly, but human connection was far more likely to happen by default because we're biologically and neurochemically wired for connection. Okay, so when we're in the same space, we are way, way, way more likely, neurodivergence aside, we are just more likely as humans to connect.
Yep.
In this distributed remote hybrid world, and this is the key, if we don't prioritize connection, human connection, it's not going to happen.
It's not the natural state.
It's
So
not the.
before it was the natural state, and now it's not the natural state. Can I ask you before you go on? There's so many questions I want to ask, but
Yeah,
um, uh, how do you define connection?
that's a great question. So normally we'll measure engagement, yeah, employee engagement.
Engagement. Yep. Yep.
That's one. It's a business metric, and it's one way, and it's how engaged is my employee with me, with my values, with the work I give them. Connection is two-way. And if one of those ways breaks, connection breaks. So when we're
Mm.
talking about human connection in the workplace or employee connection, I'm not as keen on that. It's two-way. And connection is about the relationship between colleagues and managers, between colleagues and the vision, values, goals of the organization. But that's the key difference. It's two-way. And it needs both sides of the party to be prioritizing that connection or it breaks. It's not a business metric, it's a human metric, but it has real business benefits.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It's like when we talk about engagement, you're like, how engaged are you with the work?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like the work doesn't love you back, right? The
Yeah,
work,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, you're like, I'm compelled to do this, but it isn't two way. That is really clarifying.
But
S-
it might be, but you're not valuing it in that metric or checking it in on it.
Yeah. Um, so, so it's not okay. So it's not a business metric. So why is it important?
All of the data that has been shown, so there's loads of reasons on this. Um, the Gallup 24 survey said that this disengaged, disconnected workplace, it's got a real business impact. That they've reckoned that the value of this disconnected workplace is $8.9 trillion dollars. So that's like 9% of GDP annually, the world, 9% of all the money that we earn going down the drain because we're not kind of connected.
Mm.
The same survey, this workplace says that there's two sides. There are business impacts of a disconnected workplace around engagement, around productivity, and still retention. If we don't feel connected to our colleagues and our managers, we're going to go. But there's also that well-being and human element to it. So if connection breaks, the business metrics go down. But when connection break in a hybrid and remote workplace, our sense of mental health, our feeling of isolation, our own personal capabilities and self-worth, they start to demise as well. And that's the key with connection is we're valuing both sides of that coin, whereas engagement doesn't necessarily have anything to do with that individual well-being side. That's why it's so important to me.
Well, you're talking about it like I think for me there is a gap where you're saying, well, the connection is going to break, but in fact, what we've already agreed on is in a hybrid world, it's much more likely that there is not a connection in the first place, or it's like if you're in the room, it's people are saying, hey, I've been working with this person for 4 years and I've never met them in person.
You're the key here. You're at this is my mantra, Josh. This is the thing I'm passionate about more than anything is I'd love to start switching the conversation to talk about human connection over physical connection because physical connection is one type of human connection and it's a really important part for certain types of work and more so or less so for certain individuals. But human connection is the conversation we can be having. If we talk about how can we create human connection, it stops us talking about just the return to office mandates and so on,
That's
or
right.
in the office, out the office. Human connection is a broader, richer, more interesting conversation. That's the one I
That
love making
I
thought leaders.
think this is I just think this is the reframe that we all need to be like jumping up and down about, right? So it's like the conversation is currently return to office versus remote, right? Like RTO versus remote.
Boring.
And it's like it's not that is a that it isn't that is a dead end of a conversation. No, I think this, no, I think that. But in fact, it's this framing in a how can we do our work better, and we have kind of the status quo businesses that are yearning for in office because that's where those connections happened automatically, and they don't know, I believe my observation, they don't know that that's what is missing, but they just
Mm,
know that when we were together it was better.
it's better.
And so you and I are 100% aligned where it's it is possible, and there's a lot of benefits to hybrid work,
Mm,
and we need to learn this new skill. We need
yeah.
to create do the work that the square the work of connection that the square footage of our office spaces used to do no longer exists. And so managers and leaders and individual contributors have to prioritize this connection. And it is weird and awkward and like you just don't you've never done it before. You've never focused on it before. But in fact, what you're arguing is that, and what you've spun up an entire business around is it is critical to get work done in the long run. Can we do emails faster? Yes, but that's not the whole of work. And
No.
that's where I think this is such an interesting conversation, and reframing it is we just need to blast this out to the world so that we can have language that's going to enable us to have a bigger, better, more productive conversation.
I honestly, language is so important, isn't that? Switch between physical connection and human connection. That's a really big, it's one word, but like in the UK during that pandemic, we were all issued mandates around social distancing.
Yeah.
We didn't need to social distance. We needed to physically distance. One, it's what we needed to be 2 meters. I want to chat. I want to be friends. I want to make friends. I want to maintain friendships. I just can't be within 2 meters. And this is the same now, I feel. There's the human connection. And the key thing is about humans is if we want to say, hey, leaders, managers, culture designers, how do we prioritize human connection over physical connection? As humans, we will only ever prioritize something that we really value, yeah, that we really feel is important. And we'll only ever really value something and think it's important if we actually quite deeply understand it. And so part of what we're trying to do with Connection Heroes is let's really understand human connection. Let's understand neurochemically what's happening between us, Josh. We haven't spoken much, but we're building rapport, something's happening. We've got neurochemicals flying out of our brains right now, and it's going to impact our physiology. There's real science behind human connection, which isn't solely based on our physical proximity. So if we can raise some awareness and understanding of this and think, gosh, there's a bit more to it, isn't there? There's a bit more to this. Maybe this is important. That's when we start to get people to reframe, think differently, and then start to prioritize this stuff. But it's got to come from understanding. It's got to come from knowledge.
Obviously, we're not going to uncover all of everything that and are able to convey on this short discussion, but let's move forward. Give us some top level way tips, tricks, tools for creating those connections, those human connections. Because my guess is most people who are listening to this are probably from, minute one is like, oh yeah, obviously, yes, I'm into it.
Yeah.
So how do we do it? What have you learned and what is working?
So, number one, this awareness sounds sciencey, but bear with me, of this neuroscience, the thing that's happening when we're connecting and how that impacts us. So we've got lots of parts to our brain, but dead simply, we've got a primitive bit back here, which has
Yep.
only got three drivers, but they drive so much of what they do. They want
Yep.
to keep us alive, they want us to pass on our DNA, and they want us, and this is important, to be part of that tribe. So back in the old days when we all lived in caves, we couldn't ask for help because it would make us feel weak, yeah, and that might get us kicked out of the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't show
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability because again that would maybe get us kicked out of the tribe. So when we feel stressed, so when we're working away from our client colleagues and we don't know if we connect, that little part of the tribe bit makes us stop asking for help, and it makes us not want to show vulnerabilities. But all of the organizational psychology background shows that those are the two things that build trust in teams, which we all know that psychological safety is the basis for really good, authentic culture. So making sure that in your teams, you're just raising this awareness that people don't want to ask for help in this hybrid world and they don't want to show vulnerability. So how can we design into our culture and into our management structures and into the way that we work little practices? So, maybe we do excuse my French, fuck up Friday where we all share something that's gone wrong that week and we make it
I love
okay.
that. That's so good. That's so good.
you know, We hardwire. We call them connection rituals, just little daily things, weekly things, things we
Yeah.
do. We
Yeah.
counter some of this stuff.
Yeah. Practice is what I hear, right? Because it's not, we're so hardwired to not be vulnerable. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, there is a vulnerability. There was some work that I was just doing with a client, and I was asking the leaders to share stories to demonstrate vulnerability so that, right, like that's it, like that's because you want to do what the leader's doing, and so they need to do it first so that you know that you're not going to get kicked out of the tribe.
That's exactly it. So there's certain rituals we can do which are directly related to just on neurochemistry.
Hmm.
Then there's also just really practical things that we can do. So we're we're almost at the end of our first pilot program. We're dead new, we're brand new. And there's lots of trends that are coming through of things that are blocking connection, blocking human connection in the workplace. And one
Hmm.
of them, you guys will all know this, crap meetings. People are really, really, really
Hmm.
bad at hosting online meetings. There's no human connection. There's nothing relational. It's transactional.
Hmm.
Change it, you know. So we've had our delegates come up, our cohorts come up with a lot of these kind of connection rituals that most of them don't come from us, but they've got rules like rituals like no double dipping. So no double dipping means think who you invite to your meetings. Don't invite two people from the same team. That's crazy. It's a waste of resource.
Hmm.
Pisses people off. We're spending too much time in meetings, so don't double dip. Or tasty titles was another one. You know, when
Say
you
this.
want your
Wait, I missed the second. The accent got no tasty. What?
tasty titles. If you want
Tasty
your
titles.
meeting to pop in someone's calendar, give it a name that's interesting, that's intriguing, we're in this sea of sameness, aren't we? We just live through our screen calendars and catch up with so and so, review it's when I think back 15 years ago, when I was on this transition from bustly city centre in-person team to remote team, the fun was a lot of the big part of the human connection. You know, humor is a huge driver in what makes us connect. We want to give people little dopamine hits. We want to release oxytocin is the connection neurochemical. That's what we want released. And little moments, fun, personal. Let yourself sign through. Don't like catch up with Josh at 7 p.m. No, be interesting, be
Yeah.
different, raise a
Yeah.
smile,
Yeah.
connect.
And I mean, it's a little dope a hit that is associated with a moment with somebody else.
Absolutely.
That's what I love that. Okay, no double dipping. Don't bring two people from one team. No tasty titles. What else? I feel like these are all very
Oh,
savory.
we had a great one. So we had one moment. So we help organization figure out what their connection blockers are, what stops it, and then we come
Mm.
up with rituals to solve
What
those.
are your connection blockers? Okay, that's the
Yeah,
key question here.
that's the key question. And so one team came up with the chaos candle, which I loved. So one time when connection got black for them was fully distributed team, fully remote team,
Hmm.
powered, all good, until one of the bosses decides to just kind of come in and just be helpful, just add some ideas into the mix.
Yes, yes, yes.
All
I
of a
just want to
sudden,
get this done. I want to
yeah,
fix
am
it.
I trusted? Am I still the owner? All of those human emotions. And clearly, the bosses are good guys. They just want to help. They've had some experience, fling some ideas in. The receivers, the project managers, they do want ideas, but they're scared because this is the boss, right? So this came out and we're like, right, okay, let's be human. What would humans do in this? So they decided they were going to light the chaos candle. So every time that intervention comes on, actually one of them just went onto an online store and they could actually buy something called a chaos candle. But it was just this language, this habit of saying, right, we're coming together as humans now. I know you're coming with best intent. So we're also fueled by like evidence-based positive psychology, which is let's just assume best intent. So let's assume that you still trust me as the manager here. You just want to add some ideas. And let's just, accept that you don't have to take all of these on board. Let's just assume best intent. So yeah, they'd like the chaos candle. That was one of their rituals, which I
Well, so
love.
is that the intention? Is the intention just to kind of a visual representation of what's happening in the moment? And
Yeah, it's
and
just
does the boss know that the chaos can what the chaos can does?
yes, everybody knows. That's the point. That's the whole point. It's like, oh, hey, right, you're coming in, incoming, get the chaos candlelight. Because this is what's happening. This is a real trend, Josh, that we've seen coming through. When people are building relationships through screens, especially like you said earlier, when there was no previous relationship, when we only know each other in this way,
Mm.
there's this veneer, especially for us Brits, of this politeness. Everybody's very polite, everybody's very nice at arm's length. And actually, being nice isn't being kind. If you
Yes.
want to be a kind human, sometimes you have to not be nice. So we introduced, for example, I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know this, that the radical candor
Yep.
framework
Yep.
about that, bravely telling the truth because you
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
So that's one of the tools that we use. And yeah, we're all a bit politey. So like, let's just, and that's what we do, be honest. Like, what moments make you cringe? What make moments make you step back from your colleagues? What moments start to erode connections? Bring those out, have honest conversations, and then assume best intent and say, well, do you really think they mean that? Do you really think that's in their intent? Or do you just not really understand what's going on in their background? Do and it's this just driving through those difficult conversations to find the human truth and then introduce. That's why we talk about rituals. We don't talk about systemic operational change. These little rituals can have a bigger impact on culture because they're everyday behaviors.
What I'm taking away from the chaos candle is what you're doing is making visible the kind of interpersonal detritus or activities or engagements that like interactions that occur that we typically do not talk about. And it's
Yeah,
particularly powerful when it is like a negative and it's you're able to name it, call it out and say, "Hey, can you instead of saying, "Hey, can you stop doing this?" It's like, "No, I understand. We're all human here." And it makes it okay. It's sort of right, like name it to sort of take its power away. And when I'm now thinking, because it's like I feel like I repeat myself every time I'm with any client, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you have a communication problem, surprise, right? But what I think you're illuminating is actually what I mean when I say it's a communication problem and what other people aren't able to articulate. You're like, could you communicate more? And I'm like, and it's like, well, there's only so much you can communicate. And what do we actually mean? What we're actually talking about that you're making me realize, and it becomes a connection blocker, is are these um, interstitial uh, kind of interactions or effects that we're feeling that nobody wants to acknowledge.
yeah, that's
And you sort of
exactly.
protect yourself and you protect others. And it's like, oh, they're just doing it for show. It's it's like the opposite of being, it's like a political, right? In the business world, right? You're political and you have to like hide face here and do things here, but what you're doing is you're blocking those actual true connections. And
Mm,
so by kind of clearing the air and allowing for and naming it, you're actually creating some connection. And I'm going to go right back to that part of the tribe. You're building that trust, enabling to be vulnerable, because that's the opposite. If you're hiding that, you're hiding any vulnerability. And so what I'm taking away from this is like when it's like, oh, we need more transparency in this organization. It's not I need more data.
no,
It's I need more truth.
yeah, you you're bang on, Josh. You're absolutely bang on, and it's built and it's building and it's under the current and it's subconscious for so much of it, which is why we start with this neuroscience of connection. We just start to raise that awareness, self-awareness. So good connections start with whether you're wired into yourself. And because until you start to, if you create this arena of psychological safety where these discussions can happen,
Mm-hmm.
all those
Mm-hmm.
discussions happen, there's these little realizations because we were all in trauma, right, when we started working like this. Not all. Many of us were in a very traumatic
I
situation.
think I think you could safely say all, but yes, go
All.
ahead.
So we're in catch-up mode, aren't we, on the impact of this on ourselves as
Yeah.
individuals. And
Yeah.
we have, when we run the program, we always start by people with an exercise which makes them reflect on why human connection matters to them as an individual. So forget the workplace, forget everything to you. And we ask them to do one of two things. We say, think of a time when connection, human connection, the creation of a connection had a real positive impact on you as an individual, and or think of a time when you needed connection and that wasn't available to you, and there was therefore an adverse or a negative effect.
Yeah.
And you would guess and would be right that 80% of the stories that come out are times from that really difficult pandemic time. And it's impacted us all. It's a commonality, you know, same ship, different seas, whatever we want to say. And this hasn't been worked through for a lot of people. So we're amazed. We're not surprised, but we're amazed at the level of vulnerability through the program that people will show, and they're showing that in front of their colleagues, and being accepted, and finding that commonality, but that ability to be vulnerable and figure out that. And that's what we took for granted, I think, in those older ways of working. You know, when I was in my 20s and my 30s, took it for granted, and we haven't realized that the world of work has changed. And if we do not prioritize this, we will lose it. And our businesses and our teams and ourselves will be the poorer for it.
Woo. Yeah. Okay. This is yeah, this is great. I mean, there's so many directions this conversation could go, could have gone. And we've covered a lot of ground. Amazing. Di Gates, thank you so much. You can learn more about Di and her work at connectionheroes.co.uk. Man, revelations and takeaways and all sorts of stuff here. I am going to be thinking about this for the rest of the week, maybe even the rest of my life. So thank you for coming into my life, coming on Great Mondays Radio. It was just so enlightening to have this conversation. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, Josh.